Hello and welcome back to Friday Minis. Today, let's talk about email. It's something that we all use, but as it turns out, depending on how you have things set up, you could have a very different experience from the next person. Here's the deal. One very major difference is whether you use the web interface for an email account or whether you actually use an email client software. Chances are you're very familiar with one and not at all with the other because, well, whatever your workflow is, right, you would be using just the one. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off by looking at the differences between the two, right? What is a web client in the first place? And then we'll think about how it actually interacts with your email account. So let's begin. First, let's say you are a Gmail user. You could, of course, log in to the Gmail website and that shows you your mail. This is what we call a web client. Essentially, you're just visiting a web page that shows you the contents of your inbox, right? And you can use it to compose email and so on. That is as simple as it gets. Now, the alternative will be to use an email client. That is, instead of going onto a web page, you have a software on your computer. This software would go to, say, Gmail servers, retrieve your mail, display them, you can send email through that software, and so on. What this means is there needs to be sort of one additional step. You're gonna have to set up your email client correctly so that, well, it can identify yourself and it can do all the actions that you would expect out of an email client, right? Retrieving mail, sending mail, and so on. This is where the protocols come into play. Of course, your email client is going to have to use a standardized set of language to speak to any email service, right? And vice versa. And as it turns out, this setup is a little bit more complex than it seems. You see, there are several different technologies out there that dictate how you can actually communicate with an email server. These are of course called protocols, and there are three of them. They are namely SMTP, IMAP, and POP, sometimes also known as POP3. Let's take a look at each one of these, let's weigh them up and see what their differences are. Now, most of the time, you will be retrieving information from your mailbox. And for that, we'll use either POP or IMAP. One of the two, right? Pick one. POP stands for the Post Office Protocol. We're currently on version 3, which is why usually we would say POP3. Generally, how this works is it connects to the server, retrieves your mail, and basically deletes them from the server. You only have an offline copy of all your email. From time to time, your mail client will attempt to do the same thing again to see if there's new mail. IMAP, on the other hand, while similar in the sense that it does connect, right, it does retrieve your messages. Firstly, it doesn't actually delete the messages on the actual server itself. You're just getting a mirror of the contents of the server. And again, unlike POP, the connection actually stays open. Now, of course, POP cuts off the connection the moment you're done, right? Whereas for IMAP, that stays open, and what that means is it allows a constant stream of communication between your mail client and the server. Let's now compare sort of the differences between the two. Now, because POP deletes your emails and IMAP doesn't, what this means is POP gives you more privacy, right? You don't actually have a copy of your information just hanging around. However, that makes it impossible for you to use more than one POP client. You can of course imagine that, when one client goes ahead and fetches from your server, everything is deleted. If your second client, say on a different device like your phone, comes along and tries to retrieve email, it's not going to see anything. In fact, after a period of use, you would expect the contents of your two POP inboxes to diverge. They're going to have different sets of emails and that's going to be messy. So no, you don't want to do that. For synchronization across multiple devices, IMAP is the better choice because it leaves your emails hanging around. That way, every client will have the same idea of what is in the mailbox. Nowadays, because we have multiple devices, right, we have, perhaps multiple computers, we have mobile devices, IMAP tends to be the better option in this regard. Second, in terms of the connection itself, because POP cuts off the connection, well, there is no way for the server to notify you that you've got a new email. Essentially, you can only constantly check, right? This is called polling. You can only constantly check to see if there's new mail. And if there is, update it. Since this happens at an interval, well, you get notifications slower, and this puts a lot of load on the server side. IMAP, on the other hand, keeps the connection open. What this means is when the server receives a new message intended for you, it can simply push that along, right to your client. What this means is you'll get notifications faster, and well, if there is no new email, you have very little communication overhead between these two parts. So that's the difference between POP and IMAP. The last protocol we've talked about is called SMTP, Simple Mail Transfer Protocol. And for this one, well, its purpose is to simply send email through a particular server. So this is sort of the other side of the communications. It is your mail client sending a message over to the server and telling it to, well, authenticate first and then send email. So what this means is when you have a mail client set up, you're going to have to link it up to either IMAP or POP, pick one, and SMTP. So in fact, your mail client is actually communicating with your mail server using two different protocols at any point of time. Of course, all this comes back to the question of why do we really need a mail client? Why can't we just use the web interface? Now, usually the web interface is good enough, but in my case, because I'm managing multiple email accounts, having a single mail client bring everything together is convenient. I get to manage everything at one glance, and because I'm using Mozilla Thunderbird, I get to add add-ons to my email client, right? So yeah, I can get cool features like color coding and things like that. So yeah, there you have it. Not everyone needs a mail client, but if you have one, well, it's actually using several interesting protocols to communicate with the mail server. That's all there is for this episode of Friday Minis. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, you're watching 0612 TV with NERDfirst.net. Thank you very much for watching. If you like my work and are feeling generous, you can shoot me a one-time donation on PayPal or sign up for a recurring one on Patreon. Of course, you can simply like, comment, and subscribe. You know the deal. For more videos, links to my channel and a related playlist are on screen. Thank you for your support.